Life with purpose, rise and shine. It's been so long since I've created a video on this channel. I've been so busy, y'all. Not that I'm making excuses, because it kind of is an excuse. I've just been having so much going on, just in life. Filming for my second channel, which when you're starting anything off, you have to devote your full undivided attention to that thing, whether it be a business or a passion that you're pursuing, whatever it is that you're anything that you're trying to see growth from. So, it could be anything that you're trying to see growth from. You have to devote your undivided attention to that thing. Because how are you going to see results if you're not 100% fully committing to that thing and taking it seriously? And so my second channel, that's what that's been for me, because I felt I was in a moment where I was being called to do something that really was bigger than me. Because, when I do life with purpose, it's just, it's kind of like I could let my hair down. I'm giving a word, I'm just really speaking from my spirit. There's no thought put into it because it's not my own self, but the words of the Father that's just pouring into me. And so I'm just pouring out as He's pouring in, and that's without effort, The only thing that requires is time in His presence, time reading His word, time studying who He is as spirit. That's the only requirement. So when you are called to do something bigger than yourself, which I was when I was called to do my second channel, I had to step away from, not being involved, because life with purpose, in a sense, I'm not involved because, it's really not me speaking. So the second channel was like 100%. I'm the forefront, the voice, the creative mind, and just one, because I have two other people on the team. So I'm just one of the creative minds on the channel. But even when you have help, even when you have support from others, you still find yourself overexerting yourself, because you want to make sure that everything is as perfect as it can be, right? You want to make sure that you can be without pitfall as much as possible. And so that's what that was like for me. And so I've kind of just been, caught up in that. But now, that little baby is off the ground, soaring high. And now I need to get back to what matters the most. And that's just being able to be so super free on life with purpose, and just getting back to just speaking of the goodness of the Father. And, that's what I love, y'all. That's what I love to do. If He just called me to do life with purpose and life with purpose alone and nothing else, I would be completely happy in life. So today is July 25th, 2022, and it is 7:35 a.m. I'm just getting back from dropping my daughter off. And so I'm just getting back to my apartment. Of course, she has school early in the morning. So today was one of those just difficult mornings for me, I was finding, guys. It was just like super difficult. And so I woke up this morning feeling super frustrated. Not that I woke up this morning. Let me change that. Let me rephrase that. I didn't wake up this morning feeling frustrated. My daughter frustrated me, okay? She wants to get up in the morning and just be doing craziness. And it frustrated me so much because with her, it's never just one thing, one single isolated, situation. It's always constantly like things just back to back to back. And so with her, it's just always like one thing after another. Like she's just like a non-stop child. Like, sometimes kids will do, things and then sit down somewhere and then wait at least a good 10 minutes before they get back up to do something else they ain't got no business doing. Not her. She is constantly doing things she don't have no business at all doing, back to back to back to back. So I woke up this morning and just found myself just fussing with her all morning, trying to get her ready for school. It was like nonstop with her. And so, how many of us, when one thing frustrates you, it just leads into just this overflow of frustration, right? Because once you open that door of frustration, then you find yourself becoming frustrated about things that don't even have anything to do with what you're even frustrated about to begin with. And so I just found myself just after taking her to school just so overwhelmingly frustrated, and now this has trickled over from just being frustrated about what my daughter has done this morning to now I'm frustrated about life, and then you can start thinking about all the things that's not going right, in your life that should be looking different because I put in my time, my effort, I did this right, I prayed, you start thinking just off the wall, right? You're just wallowing in this frustration because you've opened that door and you've allowed frustration to creep in. And once you allow frustration to take one step, best believe it's going to take 20. And before you know it, your whole day is ruined because you're just walking around all day frustrated if you don't check it at the door. So when you notice that frustration is happening, you have to do your due diligence to just kind of put it in its place and be like, listen, that was one isolated situation that caused me to become frustrated. But guess what? It does not have to determine the rest of my day. It does not have to determine the way that I look at my life and the way things are going, because you have to understand that when you are in the Father's will and you're doing what He is calling you to do wholeheartedly, no reservation, and when you're just truly putting yourself to the back and allowing Him to be the forefront, you're not in control. You're not trying to dictate things. You're not trying to control how things happen, but you're just allowing them to happen, allowing things to flow naturally. And so when you're in that place, then you have to understand, then you have to trust that everything that's happening is happening for you and not to you. Okay, so sometimes it's just a matter of self-talk, just bringing yourself back to, you know what, that's just a moment. But I know that I'm on the right track. I know that everything, whether good or bad, that's happening in my life right now is all a part of my story. It's all a part of my journey. It's all for a reason and a purpose to get me to where it is that I need to be in life, to get me to where it is that He wants me to be in life, which is most important because we always want to be in His will. And so as I found myself in my moment of frustration, I just immediately, started talking to the Father, because when I get overwhelmed, I'm just like, let me check out of life right now, okay? Because I know that I'm putting too much focus on what's going on instead of focusing on what I should be focusing on, which is all that He has laid out for me to do. And so anytime I find myself becoming overwhelmed with life, I just check out. Listen, I don't care where I'm at. I could be in the middle of traffic, okay? I just check out mentally from whatever it is that I'm feeling frustrated about. I choose. So I make a conscious decision to take my mind off of that and to put my mind on Him. And so in that moment, I begin to talk to Him and just have this inner conversation with Him. And Father, I'm feeling so frustrated. I'm feeling so overwhelmed. And, and at the same time, reflecting on what frustrated me to begin with, and reflecting on now where I am in that frustration, and just really seeking His help and to lift me out of that moment of frustration. And so in that moment of me conversing back and forth with the Father, He just spoke to me so plainly and reminded me of the story of Exodus when the Israelites were in Egypt. And so they were under harsh enslavement at that time. And so, man, they were just overworked. Overworked, not paid, just treated harshly, beaten, you name it, it was happening. And so they, never lost their hope. They never lost their faith. They stayed in prayer. They called out to the Father, seeking his help, seeking his arm in a situation, seeking his deliverance in a situation, right? So in the midst of everything that they were going through, they desired to seek his deliverance. And so finally arrives Moses on the scene, and if you haven't read the book of Exodus, I do encourage you to read it. But, it just begins a whole story of what that enslavement looked like for the Israelites, and ultimately Moses, who helped to free the Israelites from the bondage that they was experiencing in Egypt. And so now when the Israelites were being led, after everything had taken place and the Father had came and cast his judgment upon the land for the way that they had treated the Israelites, and now he's removing them from that land and bringing them into this promised land, right? This land overflowing with milk and honey, this land where they would not be in bondage any longer, this land where they would be just overwhelmed with joy, where they would not be in lack, where they would not be in want, just being able to just truly live their lives in full without having to worry about surviving, right? Because it's something about survival that just does not allow us to be at our greatest potential, because you can't. When you don't got no food and you're trying to worry about how to pay your bills, and you're trying to worry about how to send your child to college, or you're concerned about how you're going to get to work, you ain't got no car, how you going to get around, when these different things are taking place in your life, you tend to focus on, I got to survive. I don't have time to focus on anything else, but I have to survive. And so that's the mindset that the Israelites were in, because they were in Egypt so long. So they didn't have time to dream. They didn't have time to really think about living beyond what they were experiencing in that moment. Yet at the same time, they had hope to believe that one day things would change for them. So when Moses finally arrived, they thought, yes, our prayers are answered. We seen all the Father has done, all this miraculousness that he has done upon this land. He's bringing us out. Yes, now is the time for us to live. We are going to live now, y'all. We about to be living in our big, beautiful houses, whatever that looked like in that period of time. We about to be getting fat off our cattle. Life is about to be great. Ain't no more worries after this. Because we done, for the past couple of years, been just worried beyond worried with all the heavy affliction that was upon us. But now that the Father has delivered us, life is great. We don't got no more worries. It's out the window. And I truly believe that they felt like once they were leaving the land of Egypt, that they were going straight into whatever that promise was that the Father was giving them. They believed that in that moment, it was going to be a straight transition. There was no more that they had to endure. Because after all, when you've been in captivity for so long, for so many years, just enduring, not being able to sleep when you want, not being able to move around the way you want, not being able to worship the way you want, not being able to even take a break when you want, not being able to rest when you want. And so they said, we've been through the worst. We've been through the worst. I know life is about to get good now. The Father done heard us. He done sent Moses. Life is about to be great. They had no idea that when the Father was bringing them from Egypt, that he was about to bring them into the fiery furnace. They had no idea that they was about to be pruned, tried, tested. And it's something about the Father testing you. It's something about the way he tests you that makes it so hard sometimes. It's so unbearable, because you feel like the world has already done that. So when you run to the Father, you expect that he's just going to embrace you with these open arms, that everything that you have been through in the world is over, and he's just going to sweep you off into the sunset and life's going to be great. So when you have that, when you have that thought that that's what it's going to be, and then you realize that that's not what it is, and that you find yourself being tested even more, even harder than what you was just even being tested, by the world. And so a part of you wants to run back to the world like, listen, this is too much. Okay, I did not sign up for this. This is too much. Send me back to where I came from. Matter of fact, I'd rather be back in bondage than to be in this moment of true testing by you. This is too much. It's too much for me to handle. And so that's what the Israelites were experiencing that moment. They just was experiencing, most of all, being let down. They felt that the Father let them down. They felt that he didn't care. They felt that he had no reserve for their life. They felt like, what is this? You brung us from the land of Egypt to kill us in the wilderness? You could have left us in Egypt and just let them work us to death. Starve us to death. I mean, at least we got consistent meals there. So, we really wasn't starving unless we didn't make quota. But other than that, we was treated okay. It wasn't where we wanted to be, but we was okay. And so here they're being led into the wilderness, and they find that they are dependent upon the Father for every little thing, from a drop of water to the meal that they're going to eat on a daily basis to where they're going to lay their head, and they could not understand it. It was like, what is this? You brung us from Egypt. Surely we thought we was going straight to the promised land. Like, what is this? We in the wilderness. We wandering about. We ain't got no, we barely got food, only according to what we need for the day. We don't have surplus, which we foreseen us having coming into the promised land, that it was going to be a surplus, that it wasn't going to be this drought. It seemed like it's a drought going on. We barely got any food. We struggling to get water. Moses got to come and hit the rock. It was a whole lot going on out there in the woods, and they was just like, listen, we did not sign up for this. You told us that when we left here, we was going to the promised land. So what is this? What is this right now? This don't look like no promised land. In fact, it looks like the opposite of what you promised us. This looks like pure hell. It looks like you have come to torture us and torment us even beyond that which the Egyptians were doing to us. And we ain't here for it. Just send us back. And so what they didn't understand, because they just stayed in that mind of just being overwhelmed by the situation, instead of looking beyond the situation and realizing what's happening here. Why is this happening? Which is a question that's so important to ask when you're going through things. Why is it happening? And so what the Israelites didn't understand is that when they were back in Egypt and they were in bondage, there was some habits that they picked up. It was a mindset that they had picked up. It was a hindrance upon their brain that they didn't even realize that they had picked up from being in bondage. So they had a bondage type mindset. They had a poverty mindset. They had a mindset of depending on man and not the Father. They had a mindset of being overworked. They had a mindset of not knowing their true potential, not seeing the greatness that they held as a people. It's something about being in bondage that changes the chemistry of your brain, changes the way that you think, changes the way that you act, changes the way that you talk, changes the way that you move. And so the Father seen what they couldn't even see. And sometimes, a lot of times, it even changes your heart. It will literally change your heart being in bondage. It can give you a very cold heart. If you're not careful, it can give you a very cold heart. It can give you a very cold mentality towards life. It can cause you to look at life from a poverty mindset instead of an overflowing mindset, instead of a blessed mindset. And so the Father seen what they couldn't, and He's seen what was in them, and He said, I got to do some pruning. I got to do some pruning before I bring y'all into the promised land, because there's no way that I can allow y'all to come into this land feeling broken, feeling battered, feeling beaten, feeling defeated, depending on man. There's no way that I can allow you to come into this promised land being angry, being upset, feeling like you need to be in control. There's no way I can bring you into this land not 100% healed, with a broken heart, still trying to find the pieces of your heart, still trying to there's no way I can bring you into this land. So He said, no, there's things inside of these people that I have to change, because if I don't change these things inside of these people, when I bring them into this land, they're just going to ruin it. When I bring them into this land, they're just going to destroy it. When I give them that thing that I promised them, they're not going to know what to do with it, because all of that hurt, that frustration, that pain, that failure that they experienced in the moment of bondage, it has overtaken them. So much so to the point that it's literally going to be detrimental to them entering into this promised land. He knew that if He didn't prune them, He knew that if He didn't change them, He knew that if He didn't try them to the point of of forcing them to see life from a different perspective, that He was just going to bring them into that land and they were going to do no good, that they would just go into that land and become the land, instead of helping to establish the land and bring it to the point that the Father projected it to be. So He said, no, I got to bring them to this desert. I got to get this stuff up off them. I got to get this thought process out of them. I have to change the way they view things. I have to change the way they look at things. I have to change their mentality, because they're used to being in bondage. So if I bring them into this land, they're going to have a bondage mentality. They're going to be trying to get over on one another. They're going to be trying to, it's going to be a real cutthroat type situation, because without them even realizing, they're still going to have that poverty mindset, that bondage mindset, that enslaved mindset. And so He said, I have to do something. I have to do something about this. I have to do something about their heart. I have to do something about their mind. I have to do something to change them. And so here they are in the wilderness, murmuring and complaining and can't believe this. And oh my gosh, He's bringing us through this. And I thought we was going to be living our best life. And here we are struggling. And we even seems like we living worse than what we was living in Egypt. And they going on and on and on and on. And as a result of them not understanding the assignment, a lot of them passed away in the wilderness. Different things caused them to succumb to the wilderness, to succumb to their current circumstance. It did not allow a lot of them to even see the promised land, because they couldn't see past that hurt. They couldn't see past that pain. They couldn't see past the failures that they experienced in Egypt. They couldn't see past, that enslaved mentality. And they chose to remain in bondage mentally. And because they made a conscious decision to remain in bondage mentally, they were not allowed to enter into the promised land. They were not mentally ready to enter into the promised land. And literally their thoughts caused them to die in the wilderness. because they were so, just mentally weighed down that they couldn't see beyond that. And that will cause you to die. It will cause you to die when you can't see beyond what you've been through. You have to let things go. You have to learn to let things go. You have to learn to let failure go. Let rejection go. Let the fact that you have been let down go. The fact that you've been wronged, let it go. The fact that things didn't work out the way that you thought that they should work out, let it go. Whatever it is that you've endured and you've experienced in life, you have to let it go. And it's easier said than done because, well, Melody, when I've been molested, how do I just let that go? I was a child. I didn't deserve that. What did I do to deserve such treatment? I didn't do anything to anybody. And you harbor that. You internalize it. You internalize how you felt your life should have went. My life shouldn't have went like that. I shouldn't have had to endure this. I shouldn't have had to endure that. And I think about also the Father's just, he going someplace, y'all. Stay with me. He going someplace. Last night I was watching Central Park 5. And as I was sitting there and I was watching this movie, and then, it's a Netflix series. As I was sitting there and I was watching this Netflix series, and then after the Netflix series went off, Oprah came on and she did like a whole interview with the cast of the series and of the actual men that this series was about. And as I was sitting here and I was watching these men, these 5 men who were wrongfully charged and convicted of a crime that they did not commit in the 80s. They served, basically their whole childhood behind bars into adulthood behind bars. And so there was a level of pain that they experienced from this harsh reality that they had to endure. And you can visibly see as these men sat and they told their story, how broken they still were, how defeated they still were, despite the large settlement that they had acquired from being incarcerated, which could never give them back their time. So what is money anyway when you've lost out on everything that you hoped your life to be, when it's been stripped from you? What does money mean? You feel like you've been robbed of your true essence as a child. You feel like you've been robbed of your destiny. You feel like you've been robbed of your dreams. You feel like you've been robbed of everything that you wanted for your life. You felt out of control. You felt like this is not what I had planned. This is not the way that I foreseen my life. And how is this fair? That I'm sent away from my whole entire, childhood into adulthood behind bars, being told what to do, being whipped, being beaten, being molested, being mistreated. The list goes on and on and on, because we can never truly understand what that life of bondage is like when you have not been in it. And the things that people have to endure while incarcerated is no different than slavery, way back when it first started and Africans were being stripped away from their land. It's no different. The only difference is that they're physically in a building and they know their end, that building, until, eventually that end ends and they get out. So that's the only difference between that enslavement and the enslavement of the Africans, because they literally did not know their end. And for me, that's way worse. I'd rather know my end than to not know my end. Right? At least they knew that when they went to prison, it was prison. That was it. They were moved from one building to another. And it's basically the same, situations happening. Fighting, having to survive, having to, have your guard up at all times. It does something to your mind mentally when you have to be on guard all the time. It does something to your mind mentally when you constantly have to be separated from family, from loved ones, people you love, when you feel like you've been robbed and mistreated, and it does something to you mentally when you don't deal with that mental. And so as I watched this show, my heart broke into 1,000 pieces over and over and over and over again, because I literally felt the pain, the emotion, the heartbreak, the failure. Everything that they experienced in that cell, it was like I was experiencing in one moment sitting on that couch watching. And my heart just broke. And I was just crying and crying and crying, because I felt every ounce of their pain. It's like I felt how they felt in those cells. I felt how they felt not having no control. I felt how they must have felt in that moment when all faith was lost, because as children, how could you be sentenced to this? How could this happen? There cannot be no God to allow this to happen to us. But what we don't understand as humans, even with the innate abilities that we have, we're so crafty and so educated, the dominant species here on earth. And I think it's because we're so dominant, we can't grasp the fact that we're not in control of everything. When you're blessed with the ability to be born here on earth, you don't know the story. You don't know what your story is going to be. You don't know what your destiny is going to be. You don't know what your path in life is going to look like. But as you begin to grow up and mature and develop and grow, you only hope that, or I should say, your only mission becomes what you project your life to be. Nothing more, If you have a mindset, I want to go to school, you aim to work towards that. If you have a mindset that I want to drop out of school, I want to get a job, I want to do something different, then that's what you work towards. And you feel like, you develop in that, you develop this kind of dominant, authoritative trait that you have control over your life and the path and the journey that is going to be before you. But you don't know that coming into this life, the Father has a purpose for your life. And every bad thing that happens in your life is meant for your good. When you're in His will, when you're seeking Him, when you're searching for Him, when you're asking questions, why is this happening? This thing seems like it's just so terrible, like the incident with the Central Park 5, or now the exonerated 5. They felt that you are able to control. They had no idea that the Father had a different plan for their lives. Because they were too busy caught up in, as children, naturally, and what they projected and perceived, and what they perceived their life to become. They didn't know that the Father had a different plan. They didn't know that they had to endure all they had to endure. And sometimes you endure things in your generation, even those things that seems as if it destroys you, even those things that seem like it was meant to literally rip your soul from your body. The Father had another plan. Sometimes you have to endure things in your generation so that your generations to come will not have to endure those things. Because guess what? The exonerated 5 had to endure so much. But because they had to endure so much, they are now in a position to where they can make an impact on life, that they can make a change on life, and that they can literally change the narrative going forward for generations to come. They were involved in a part of a whole situation that literally had nothing to do with them. They were just a body being used by the Father because he foresees what we can't. He foreseen that, no, there has to be, somebody got to be the GOAT. Somebody has to be the GOAT. That's the reality. You don't want it to be you. You don't want to go through harshness in life. You want to just be born and live. That's all any human ever wants. Nobody wants to be the GOAT, but somebody got to be the sacrificial lamb. The Messiah came and he had to be the sacrificial lamb. Do you think he wanted to be beaten and belittled and spat on and disrespected and talked about, and the list goes on? But he had to be the sacrificial lamb to change the narrative of the way life would be. These exonerated 5 are literally in a position now to where they can change the narrative of life that never would have happened. They never would have been in a position with so much power, because they have so much power in their hands. Just like the Messiah. You know, he went through so much, but when he rose, he had so much power in his hand. And when you think about it in the long run, it may not make sense in a moment because you're just so caught up in wallowing in your emotions of what you wanted your life to be. And I had to endure this and I had to, endure that. And the things you have to endure sometimes, mentally, some just can't handle it. It can't. It breaks them in a million pieces in a way that's far beyond repair, and they just can't handle it. They cope, but they can't handle it. And that's why when you're going through things, no matter what the situation looks like, you have to stay in the Father's presence. You have to stay in prayer, because if you don't, you will come out of bondage, battered, broken, defeated, destroyed, feeling let down, feeling inadequate, feeling like you've been robbed, feeling like you've been destroyed, feeling like you was never meant to be on earth. You have to be so careful and make sure that you stay in his face. No matter what you're going through in life, I don't care how bad the situation looks, stay in his face. Why? Praying, why? Because in all, when you're going through these things and you're in prayer, he'll speak. He'll even spare you. Or not. Or not. It's all in his hands. But when you have the understanding to see beyond your circumstance, to see beyond what you foresee, to look at life from a different perspective, then you begin to see, okay, yes, I had to go through these things. Yes, I had to be robbed of my childhood, but guess what? My child won't be robbed of his or her childhood. Yes, I had to struggle and live on the street and work my way to the top. But now that I'm at the top, now I'm in a position to where I know that my kids and my kids' kids will never have to be in that position, because I've pulled myself out from the mud. Because the Father has helped to pull me out of the mud. He's elevated me. And so my generations to come will not have to endure what I endured. Back in the day when slavery happened so that we would learn from the mistakes that we made for it to never be repeated again. To learn, because back then, it was our own people who were selling our own people, our own, same color. Different tribes, different parts of the African region, but same color, selling our own into the hands of the enemy. That had to happen in order for it to never happen again? Do you understand that sometimes some things have to happen in order for it to never happen again? Whether you like it or not. Some things have to happen in life for it to never happen again. The book of Noah, when the Father flooded the whole earth, it had to happen so that it would never happen again, because in a moment when it happened, the Father said, this will never again happen. I will never again destroy the whole earth with a flood. It had to happen for it to never happen again. So when you're going through things, just say to yourself, this has to happen so it will never happen again. And not every situation happens so it can never happen again. Some situations you just repeat, out of your own foolishness, just because you're not getting the hints. You're not getting the fact that you need to change. You're not getting the fact, but that's minute stuff, things that's just trying to be pruned. It's something different about going through a pruning and going through a life-changing, generational changing situation. When you're in a generational changing situation, the weight that comes, the trials that come, the tribulations that come with being chosen and selected, handpicked by the Father to change generations to come. It's not easy. It's a weight sometimes that seems so unbearable, unbearable. How can I endure this? You're literally carrying the burdens of the world on your shoulders. How can one person endure so much? That's what it was like for Exonerated 5. They was literally bearing the weight of generations to come on their backs. When they was in those prisons, when they were in those cells, when they at times weren't in contact with their family, moments when they were hungry, moments of molestation, moments of feeling defeated, moments of feeling broken. They did not realize. I'm trying to say this without crying. So I don't, it's just so much emotion that I'm experiencing right now, but they did not realize that they were bearing the weight of generations to come. And that's not an easy task. It's not what they expected. They never expected their life to be, I have to bear the weight of generations to come. They just seen what they wanted for their life, and that was that. Who signs up for that? Not me. I don't even want to sign up for that. But they were the sacrificial lambs, so that so many other generations would not have to repeat what they had to endure. Because in America, you're living in a broken system, a very broken system that is never in the favor of brown-skinned people. But because they endured, because they did endure, the Father knew when it was time. It was time for their sorrow to end, and it was supposed to be a new beginning for them to start. And once they was released from that fire, because they was in a fire. They was dead smack in the middle of that fire. And when they were released from that fire, they were released with power in their hands. And it was a set up, apart, appointed time when the Father knew now's the time for them to make an impact on this world. Everything that you have been through, the preview of what your past looked like, was all meant for this moment right here. all meant so that your son would never have to go through, so that your daughter would never have to go through, so that your grandkids would never have to go through. And I don't know about me, but make me the sacrificial lamb. I would rather be the sacrifice for my kids and my kids' kids than for my kids and my kids' kids to have to go through certain things that I've had to go through in life. Let me be the sacrificial lamb. Let me endure. Let me bear the weight of my generations to come so that they don't have to do it. So that generations down the line, they can be reestablished to who they are supposed to be as a people. Living life how they are supposed to live as a people. Never having to worry about police brutality, never having to worry about injustice, never having to worry about the inequalities of life. Because I've paved the way for them. It's something about what I've endured that has changed the narrative of what this future will look like for mine to come. So somebody in your generation has to be the sacrificial lamb to set the tone for generations to come, because if not, it will just repeat itself. Can you imagine what it would have been like if they would have gone through all they went through only to come out of that situation and see it repeated with their kids or their grandkids? Can you imagine how devastating that would be? There's nothing worse. And I don't care what you had to endure in your own life physically. There is nothing worse than this world. Nothing worse in this world than having to endure and then seeing your kids having to endure the very same thing. There's nothing worse than that. Nothing worse than that. So, Father, make me the sacrificial lamb, because at least I know that it's for a purpose. At least I know that if I'm enduring, it's because my kids won't have to endure, because their kids won't have to endure. I know that I'm enduring for a purpose. Even if you don't see that purpose in that moment, when the purpose does reveal itself and you see the purpose being manifested, the light bulb comes on. Now I see why. Now understand why. Now let me begin to heal my heart from everything that I've gone through in my past, because I know that it's a better future for my kids. And I know for me, anything that I have to endure, whatever it may be, if I'm able, because not everybody gets that benefit of being able to see why they had to endure, why they had to go through the things they had to go through. Because when you get an understanding as to why, when the why begins to make sense to you, all the pain don't even hurt that much anymore. It don't even hurt that much anymore. And instead of it being your pain, it becomes your power. Because you begin to see that this has been beyond me the whole time. It's for this reason that I had to endure. Now I understand. Now it makes sense to me. Now I can forgive that person for not being there. I can forgive that person for making that mistake, because it was all a part of the plan. Everything had to happen exactly the way that it happened so that I could end up right here, able to change the narrative in life. So that's it, y'all. That's it. Be willing to be the sacrificial lamb, so that you can change the narrative for generations to come. Until next video, see y'all soon.